I'll give Councillor Cotty's name in the list, even though he'll then show up on the apologies. Right, it's streaming live, isn't it? Right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Bridgford Borough Council's Growth and Development Scrutiny Group meeting. We are obviously virtually, and so this is we're still encountering new experiences for everybody. So please bear with us if we do have any technical issues at all. It is being streamed live on YouTube, so everybody who is watching on YouTube, you're very welcome. I'm sure that there will always be something of interest for somebody somewhere. The members, that there are 9 members of the committee, if I just inform you who they are. So I'm Councillor Neil Clark, I'm the chairman of the Scrutiny Group. Councillor Brennan is the vice chairman. And then we have Councillor Begum, Councillor Cotty, Councillor Howitt, Councillor Phillips, Councillor Stockwood, Councillor Verdi, and Councillor Way. Hopefully their names will come up when they are speaking, so that you are aware of who is speaking. So without further ado, let's go into the agenda, and item 1, the apologies for absence, please.
Apologies from Councillor Cotty.
Thank you very much indeed. Item 2, does anybody have any declarations of interest? I'll take silence as a no. Item 3, the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of January. Crikey, it seems a long time ago now. A lot's happened since then. Anyway, minutes of the meeting. Has everybody approved those? Everybody in favour? Anybody against? Okay, thank you very much. So we now move on to item 4, which is the actions from the previous meeting, which hopefully are on page 7. So I don't know, Mr. Mitchell, do you want, or who's going to go through these actions?
The actions are detailed in the table. Unless there's any questions, I propose they're accepted. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody? Has anything arisen since these actions were printed that change any of the meaning at all?
No, the actions were only completed, ready for this meeting, so they're up to date actions. Thank you.
Right. Anybody have any queries on those actions? If not, can we take those as accepted? Okay, thank you very much. Right, so we'll move on to item 5, which relates to open spaces. We have the report before us, but perhaps officers like to present the report first. Does anybody?
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Councillor Clark. The first item tonight is on looking at open spaces, which was a request that came from a council as part of the scrutiny programme. And what I'd like to do is run through, hopefully you can all see the screen with the presentation on it. I'd like to run through a little bit of history behind open spaces, talk through the current situation, some of the challenges going forward, and then finally hand back to you as a group to decide how you want to progress this item. Now, if I can just work, I'm going to go back 120 years here.
I remember.
Yeah, well, it certainly predates me, but it's important to understand how developments have established themselves over the years. And this is a map of West Bridgford. And I've split it into 5 areas, going back to the oldest part of West Bridgford, one of the oldest parts in blue, which is Davis Road. And at this scale, you can see straight roads, grid pattern network. You then move on a few years to the yellow area, 1930s to 40s, which is Musters Road. And again, straight roads, grid pattern. A little bit later, you go into the purple area and Greythorn Drive area of West Bridgford. And roads are starting to have a few bends put in them, but generally no open spaces at that point. And then finally, you're coming through to the 1970s with Buckfast Way, Abbey Park area of West Bridgford with very bendy roads or windy roads. And the final one I'll pick up on are the 2 green areas, which are Compton Acres and the Gamston development. Now, I just want to run through each one of those areas in a little bit more detail. Starting back with the earliest, Davis Road, as I said, straight roads, front gardens, rear gardens, big gardens. The open space area was provided by the Central Park, Bridgford Park, and still is. And the road scene looks street trees, but not a lot of green spaces on the actual street scene. You move on a little bit to the Musters Road area, and again, it's straight roads, starting to see some open space areas being created, but generally adjacent to the highway, and similarly, still gardens, large rear gardens and large front gardens. A little bit further on, again, you still starting to see some green areas with some central reserves in the highway, but not a lot of open space. And it's important to consider that when you look at where we are now as I move forward. Next stage on is the Abbey Park area, and here you see the windy roads, and you're starting to see visibility splays and big open space areas being created. And then the last slide I've got to show a bit of the history is in relation to Compton Acres, and this is Compton Acres. Councillor Phillips, you'll know it very well. And in Compton Acres, there are lots of green areas, balancing ponds, open space areas throughout that development. Gardens are starting to become smaller. Front gardens are generally driveways and not a lot of green areas. So the green areas are starting to be taken up by the open space areas and taken away from the gardens. So in history, going back to pre-2000, the council adopted all open space with no funding from the developers at all and no requirement for any resident to pay any money. That became difficult after Compton Acres. At that point, the decision makers at the time identified that we'd just taken on Compton Acres with lots of green open space areas, which was new. We hadn't done that in history, and it was going to cost a lot of money. So we brought in 2000 until 2010 what was called a commuted sum. And that was a sum that the developer paid on the completion of the estate for the council to take over the open spaces. And the commuted sum covered a period of 15 years. And that worked well for 10 years, but then we identified a problem, and the problem was Gamston. And Gamston was meant to be commuted sums, and the developer didn't pay over the money. In essence, they kept the land, and then it became a problem maintaining it as the developer didn't maintain it. So in 2011, we again chose to change the process in that the council would not take a commuted sum, it would not adopt. It would then ask the developer to establish a management company for the future maintenance of that open space. And that is Rushcliffe, but that is a similar approach that's been taken across the country. So the current position is the developer are responsible for the maintenance of the open spaces. And the way they do that is they transfer that responsibility back to the residents through what is called a management fee. And I'll come on to management, what the sorts of managed fee a bit later. But for every property on that development, whether they're in front of an open space or quite away from it, they will pay a monthly charge exactly the same, and they will pay that charge for the entirety of the time they live in that house. Now, the challenge moving forward, and the map in front of you is a map of the strategic sites that we've agreed in our local plan, and in yellow, and the purple areas are the local plan Part 2 sites, which are smaller, but can be up to 200 houses. But they are smaller than the 3,000 and 4,000 house developments at Clifton. And what I want to do is give you some examples of the different size of sites and how they are affected by open space. And the first one is a very small site. It's an infill site. I think this one's in Willoughby. And if you look on the left, there are 5 houses in this small infill site. We see a lot of these each year. No open space, or very little open space, generally maintained by the owner, and no problem at all. No one visits that site except the residents or their guests. It's not a destination. You then move on slightly up a scale in development size, and you move to this site in Aslockton, which is 70 odd houses. And now you can see the impact of open spaces coming in, because in this area you've got large open space areas surrounding development with drainage structures in them. You've got some drainage ponds up here, and you've got a play area. And in this instance, the management company is established, and the residents will pay towards the maintenance of those areas. Generally, even though the play area is here, you'll get a few residents from outside using that play area, but generally that play area will be used by the residents on the development itself. Now, the final one is the one where the challenge starts to come in. And Councillor Stockwood, you'll recognise this as being Bingham. And Bingham is a development of 1,050 houses. And it has significant areas of open space within it. Going down the Car Dyke, you have a whole swathe of green space down the Car Dyke, and a small country park area with a lake in it. And again, dotted around this other development, there are small bits of open space and play areas over there. Now, all that area under the current allocation is paid for as part of a management company by the residents. Now, this is where this is starting to become a destination place. So people will go to visit and walk around this lake and country park from Bingham, from East Bridgford and further afield, but the residents are paying for that maintenance of that area. It's currently only got about 100 houses built, and it will probably take between 5 to 10 years at least to build out. But eventually that site will be fully operational, and the developer will leave, and the residents will be left with a management company maintaining it. Now, and that's the issue we have, I think. I think on the smaller sites, I don't think it's a problem. The medium sites may be a slight problem, but not much. But on the very large sites, and I've identified 4 there, Bingham, Cotgrave, Gamston, and Cotgrave again, 3. That's where you're starting to have large park areas, and the one that should have been Clifton, south of Clifton Fareham, is there, so that makes the 4. They've all got large park areas, probably with the exception of Cotgrave, which has a country park next to it, and therefore is not so badly affected. These areas are fully funded by the development, and the management companies could be an issue with the management companies taking those forward. Now, before we go into you decide whether that's right or wrong, I want to give you a few facts and figures to this. The management company fee can vary, but I'm going to say it's an average of about £200 a property. Some could be lower if there's less space, but generally it's about £200 per annum, which equates to £4 a week. Now, if you remember saying back in history, large gardens in residence, and now we are small gardens and small properties, in essence, the maintenance of those large gardens has been transferred into the open space areas, and therefore £4 a week may not be too much to pay for a garden that you don't have, but a facility that you've got to walk around. Now, if I put it another way and go, okay, if the local authority was going to take all that area of land on, then over the next 10, 15 years, then we would build approximately 13,000 homes that are in the medium or large home capacity, all of which would be subject to a £200 per annum management fee. Now that equates to around about £2.6 million per year. And there you can see the challenge that you'd think it'd be great, we can go back and adopt the areas as a council, but the budget will not allow it to happen when it's that sort of figure a year maintenance of those areas. So just to summarize, that in the report you have, there aren't any options, but I've identified 4 options for your thoughts here. And the first one is do nothing. Leave as it currently is. It's working well. There aren't any problems at the moment, but there may be some emerging in the future, but at the moment there aren't any problems. The second one is, and I've given the difficulty of that, but Rushcliffe, request Rushcliffe to take the responsibility for some or all of those areas on. Now, there's some could be for something like Bingham with that large community area, but not necessarily all the other areas. That still has a significant cost associated with it. Third one is a lot of these areas are outside West Bridgford. I gave the example of West Bridgford, but parishes maintain areas within their wards, their areas. And the third one, and we do try this to say, does the parish council want to take on that open space and manage it? And the final option is to try and identify a third party to take it on. For example, Notts Wildlife, and Notts Wildlife take on for example, Hook Nature Reserve down there. The problem with the options 2, 3 and 4 are the funding mechanisms, because it's whether the borough council, whether the parish council or whether a third party, it costs a lot of money. And one of the only ways of doing this would be to collect that money from the residents. That's all I've got to say. So I'll just leave this slide and then close down the presentation. I'm happy to go back over any slides if needed. But the object of this session was me to give you a background on it and you to decide whether you would like any further investigation work or if you've got any views on practical solutions. Now, I know, Councillor Way, you've sent me lots of information. Thank you very much, and it's very helpful. It's still a difficult challenge taking it forward. So with that, Chairman, I'll pass back to you if I can.
Okay. Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Actually, rather than leave that, oh, sorry. Can we just have the slide up where you had the 4 options just for a moment?
Yeah.
The one where it said do nothing, and then 2, 3 and 4.
Can you see that now?
Yeah.
Okay.
So just for the benefit of maybe some of the newer members of the scrutiny group, because obviously I was very much aware of this issue when it first arose. And as Mr. Mitchell has already explained, back in 2000, we recognised that there was a major financial burden looming for the Borough Council. We were already in the realms of spending a lot of money on maintenance of open spaces, and then the changes took place, but obviously that was still a time bomb, because the commuted sum meant that after 15 years, again, an enormous burden financially would be placed on the council. And we decided that the best way to try and address that, as many other councils had already done around the country, we decided that the best thing to do was to have a management company take over the open spaces so that the residents could actually contribute towards that management company. And that would mean that the burden And although Mr. Mitchell's mentioned 2.6 million as a potential, there were already millions of pounds burden already stacking up for the council. And if it had been allowed to continue, we would really have been sinking in debt. And the real problem really came to the fore with the Gamston development, where there were two developers, the commuter sums were coming to an end, and we hadn't got money from one of the developers, and we really were going to have a major time bomb. So these are the decisions that we took to alleviate that burden. Now, I do recognise that where we are now, perhaps we are looking at some unforeseen circumstances, and I think Councillor Way is absolutely fair enough to bring this up as an item, because potentially there maybe is another time bomb, or at least perhaps time bomb isn't right, uncertainty in the future as regards the residents' liabilities. And the reason I think that it is appropriate for us to look at this is because we have to scrutinise the council's policy to ensure that we are not burdening the residents unfairly for the future. Because I do recognise, on the one hand, it is easy for the council to say, well, the burden's being transferred onto the residents, therefore it's got nothing to do with us anymore. It's up to the management company to make sure the fees remain reasonable. But we do also have to recognise that it's the council's policy that has created that in the first place. So for me, I just wanted to summarise that, and as far as I'm concerned, I think the issue is this policy right? Does it need adjusting? And I think that for me, there is a case for doing some sort of survey work to see what fees are being charged. Are they being increased? Is there a way of capping those fees, or at least limiting, maybe not capping them, but limiting the percentage increases by year? Because potentially, I'm sure there aren't any unscrupulous management companies at the moment, but if a more unscrupulous management company was to appear, then they would be able to really hike up the fees with little control over it. And I think that's probably one of the concerns that could be there in the future. So I think that's really the issues that we need to talk about. I think that we do need to do some more work to satisfy ourselves that the policy is right or needs adjusting. So on that basis, having just made those few opening comments, I will now just open it up to the floor, and the first hand I can see is Councillor Phillips.
Thank you. I've made a number of points after reading the presentation, and I just want to go through these so you can sort of have a little think about the points I'm going to raise. So, new development management fees are unregulated, they're uncapped, and they're open to abuse. I think we're all aware of that. Homeowners who pay management fees pay the same council tax rates as those who don't pay management fees. Management fee property owners pay to have their green spaces maintained. Non-management fee property owners have theirs done for free. They can't sell their homes without the permission of the management company. So if they're in dispute about maintenance or payments, they've got them over a barrel. They can't sell those properties without the okay from the management company. How will Rushcliffe Borough Council protect and support its residents and from the management companies should they fail to maintain open spaces properly or push up fees unjustifiably? I would like the council to offer a one council tax band reduction to help cover the costs for these management company fees. I would also like the council to consider a cap on these fees of no more than one council tax band difference, say based on band D. The council should take responsibility for any lack of maintenance by the management companies hold them accountable to carry out the maintenance themselves, and recharge management companies if we have to do the work. New property owners should not be discriminated against by having to pay for some services other Rushcliffe residents get included for free as part of their council tax band. It is totally unfair system that Rushcliffe Borough Council need to address and treat all residents equally. They are my sort of points I want to throw out there, and maybe have some more discussion, because it really is unfair that we treat people in new properties different to people like me who've been here for 27 years and I get all my green spaces done for free. Thank you.
Oh, well, maybe we should ask you for a contribution then, perhaps.
I have no problem with that, Neil. If everybody contributes, that is absolutely fine. I just think it is unfair that some people have to pay more to have what we're already having done for free. You know, I'd be absolutely happy with that.
Yeah, I think that's possibly another way of saying there's basically that's an extra item being put on the council tax. But the issue there, of course, you can't just push the council tax up willy-nilly, because we're bound by constraints. But the I'll come to you second, Councillor Way, and I apologise. Actually, I should have come to you first, so I do apologise for that. But just to answer your one point, is just going back to what I said in my introductory comments. It was done initially for a very good reason, to alleviate the financial burden that was looming on the council, which would have been too great for us to sustain. And what we would have ended up with, I'm absolutely certain, is that we wouldn't have been able to find the money to pay for maintaining the open spaces. They'd have got into disrepair, and then the council would have been attacked for lack of maintenance and not looking after the open spaces. So, if you like, we're as bad burnt as scolded. I'm not pretending there's any easy solution to this, and I think it's good to have this debate to see if there are any solutions to amend the scheme, to try doing something differently. But there are so many factors, and I don't think we'd really taken into account the fact that on a large development, there would be, say, 1,000 householders paying for instance, the one at Bingham, the country park facility, and yet it's open to anybody to use. So some people pay for it and some people don't. So it's one of those very strange anomalies. Councillor Way, I'll come back to you in a second, Councillor Phillips. Councillor Way, would you like to contribute?
There's a few things I agree with a lot of what Councillor Phillips has said, and I'm glad he feels like that. I think one of the points that has been raised to me by local residents is that it's not just about the green space. I think if there'd been a management company put in charge to look after the green spaces and the attenuation ponds and so on for a reasonable fee, I don't think there would be so much upset for them. It's everything else that's been added on by the management company in terms of getting permission to put a shed in their garden and paying a fee for it, and having a charge on their properties despite the fact that they're freehold, and a lot of other things. And I'm certain that it wasn't the intention of the council for that to happen when they were looking at managing just green space. So that's one of the things that I think's caused a lot of issues. And I've had an email from a resident in the last couple of weeks, and she sounds exceedingly distressed about the pressure she's being put under to pay this bill. She says she didn't know about it, which seems as if she might have missed it when she bought the house. And I think sometimes when you're buying a house, things are so complicated and thrown at you, it's very easy to miss something vital unless you've got a really on the ball solicitor who will explain it all to you. The other main bone of contention that we have in East Leek is that in one of the particular developments, there's an issue with a car park about whether it's private for the residents or a local public amenity. And it would appear that the developers and the Borough Council have a different interpretation, and I use that word that they've used, of what the intention was, and they obviously need some clarification in this. And the residents perhaps don't understand that they're paying for this, but it's actually available for other people. And there have been instances of people being told not to bring their children onto a particular playground because it's not theirs. Now, this playground will end up being right next to our new school, which will hopefully happen in the next couple of years. So it will obviously be used by children before and after school, even if they don't live on that estate. This happens already in the school, the playground that's near Lantern Lane. To which I have another question. I have a lot of questions about it. Is these people pay for insurance, which presumably covers the play facilities? Does that insurance cover children using the play facilities, or only the residents' children using the play facilities? And who ensures that the play equipment's inspected and kept up to the proper standards that we as a parish council have to maintain our equipment at? That's just for starters. Okay,
Thank you very much. I was a bit mystified. I don't know, Mr. Mitchell, Councillor Way talked about management companies having to give permission for a shed. I don't understand that.
No, I don't either. And I've got a few points off both Councillor Phillips and Councillor Way, if you mind, if you just run through them. The shed one is, how do we control open spaces? It's through a planning condition. The planning condition says they have to have a management company. It doesn't say have to have a management company for private gardens, I don't think, but I will check up on that, but it shouldn't be. Could I just go back to Councillor Phillips's point? And the reason I went through the history of West Bridgford was quite important, because going back to the original one in the Davis Road area, the park was Bridgford Park. That is a public park. It's used by every member of the public, including residents of Compton Acres and indeed further afield. So that was the only park. They don't pay for any, they haven't got any other facilities on the site, and they have large gardens that they pay for themselves. The development industry and planning has changed in that those gardens, I really want to emphasize, those gardens have got a lot smaller, but all of a sudden, by breaking them small and creating open spaces, they are then expecting those areas to be taken on. And I would put the shoe on the other foot in that a resident of Davis Road will say, why the heck am I paying for all the green spaces in Compton Acres? Well, actually you are, because that was a transition site, and every element in Compton Acres is adopted. And therefore that was very lucky. It just beat the commuted sum and the management fee. And actually, this is like leasehold. I know, Councillor Way, you said it's not leasehold, but in essence, you're paying £200 a year for lease. I can't believe a solicitor does not. I mean, and Councillor Clark, you've mentioned it before. Buyer beware. You have to question when you're buying a house what liabilities you have with that house. So everyone should be aware of that. In relation to control, the management companies are operated by management committees, and the management committee can choose to sack the contractor doing the work and bring in their own. Now, whether they do that or not is a different matter. But one of the reasons we set up Streetwise as a private company was that it could offer management company services in the future under competition and provide that service. So in essence, it's the council doing the work to give you the reassurance, but it's actually paid for because actually that's what you're getting the benefit over and above long-term residents of West Bridgford who aren't getting that facility. Is there one other thing I wanted to pick up on? No, I think that they were the main points I picked up to now. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm a bit concerned to hear that other factors seem to be taken into account by management companies, because I was quite clear when we established a policy, this related to the maintaining of open spaces, grassed areas, and certainly no way had any impact at all on people's private dwelling or the gardens or anything. That's their own affair, subject obviously to planning regulations, as anyone would be, but certainly not having to get permission from the management companies to do anything. And in terms, I mean, I've done sort of test visits many years ago to house sales offices, developers, showrooms, etc. And they've always mentioned and said, well, there is a management fee that you have to pay for maintenance of open spaces. So the buyer is fully aware of that when they first buy the new house, and then it's incumbent on the solicitors to ensure that the buyer knows that that agreement is passed on to the new buyer, and that is a liability that has to take place every year. So already, actually, we are highlighting sort of various different issues that all need further debate, I think. Councillor Stockwood.
Thank you very much. I hope everyone can hear me. First of all, we've talked a bit about Bingham. You've talked about it being a country park. If that country park, as you call it, did not exist, those properties would flood. That is a flood management system which only required because those houses would flood if they did not have that. It's not the responsibility of everybody else in Bingham to stop these people, all the works that were done to stop these people's houses from flooding. It's a different thing, I think. But I won't talk about just Bingham. I think the questions that are asked within the report were about something called a management company. And I think there's in my understanding there's two things here. A management company is formed by the residents themselves, and the directors of that company are most likely going to be residents themselves who form a committee. There is something else I think is called a management agent, which streetwise would perhaps be. So I'm using two different terms here. Management company are residents. Management agents are these organizations which are unregulated and who come forward, and as a management agent, they manage whatever the management company asks them to do. Now, there is some concern that management agents are managing not just open spaces, but also drainage, car parking areas, shared entrances, this sort of thing. And in fact, I think there's blocks of flats in Bingham, and they have management companies, and they're just there to shared stairwells. Sometimes come under the management companies, and then there can be, if a management agent or acting on behalf of the management company, remember, is starting to collect fees for other services, then that is where people begin to express their concerns that, who is really regulating the management agents and thing. So I had a look around the internet. I think it was raised in 2017 by government as there were beginning to be real concerns at the national level around the behaviour of some management agents and the fact that it was an unregulated industry. Although there are some self-regulation schemes in present. And so there's something, I think one's called ARMA, and there are others where they have, if there is an accredited management company, management agent, I'm making a mistake myself. If an accredited management agent, they have a problem with them, you have a complaints process and you have a way to challenge what's going on, and they commit to certain standards. So although there are 4 options put before us this evening as a committee, I would like us to think as perhaps a way forward. There's been some talks about fully understanding the issue. I think it'd be very difficult to go through every housing estate and flats development to find out, are you dissatisfied with your management agent and the way that they behave? So it may be instead that the committee wants to publicise a consultation to hear written representations from residents regarding their experiences with management agents and whether they feel that this is an issue that's affecting their lives and the way in new developments. So to come to understand the issue better, it may be worth doing some consultation with residents and perhaps trying to see the other side of the story and seeing if there are either an industry representative from the regulator or a local management company who will come forward and explain why management agent will come forward and say, you know, what is the industry view on why this behaviour? The questions raised in the original points are around knowing what they should have and how they would address shortcomings. So that comes through self-regulation. So in the first instance, we could encourage self-regulation within the industry, self-regulation by management agents, asking, we do approach private landlords, even though we don't control them. We approach them and we talk to them when we're doing environmental health stuff. We could do approach as an outcome if we feel that the consultation shows that there is a concern amongst residents about this issue going forward. We could approach them and talk to them about promoting self-regulation and asking people to join an accreditation scheme. And then we could look at we've talked about, is this an unintended consequence of our decision regarding open spaces? Well, if that is the case, could we make our decision regarding open spaces clearer, and that we come to, having considered a public view and having that evidence base of the concerns of our residents, could we present that our policy moving forward is that we should have, when we say a management company will take forward, that we should have an accredited management company, and that accreditation must be maintained or passed to another. So every single time I'm making mistake in management company and management agent. Obviously the company is the resident, so a management agent that is accredited, can we require that going forward we have accredited management agents who are going to have a proper way for residents to redress any dissatisfactions or shortcomings they have with the agency that they have. So a way forward would be to better understand the issue through asking for written representations from residents, knowing more about whether there are accreditation schemes that cover the sort of issues which would work for open space areas as well, whether we can, and then perhaps promoting self-regulation within the industry first. Secondly, asking for a policy clarification or more specific based on the evidence that we've collected to say we will expect that management agent to be accredited. And then thirdly, you've got the option of going back to government and saying, well, you know, you've consulted in the past about regulating this industry. It's clearly a concern to our residents. We've done the work of listening to their views. Having scrutinised the issue, we now feel that Parliament should take on board what's been said by the people of Rushcliffe. So I think, although we talk, I mean, if a parish council wanted to take over a play area from a management agent or a management company, then I should imagine that organisation would be quite happy to take it, to pass on the responsibilities. So if there are particular local issues that can be resolved by an award by ward basis by the choices of local councils, then that's something that they can make that choice regarding. But with regards to a Rushcliffe-wide solution, an issue where we have management agents in blocks of flats, in streets of green spaces, drains and private roads and stairwells, from stairwells all the way through to whole stretches of road. I think the wider issue is to collect some more information about the thing, promote industry self-regulation, push for higher standards across everyone, perhaps publish information about who are the good, you know, where are the accredited management agents in place. Just as we publish a 5 score on a food outlet, we could say, look, if you're going into this neighbourhood, you're joining an area that's got an accredited management agent in place. And that's something that the seller of the properties would almost certainly like to say. So I would, in addition to the points raised in the presentation, I'd like to consider first self-regulation through the industry, or promoting higher standards through the work of Rushcliffe, and then contacting our parliamentary representatives if they are going to take on board the issue of regulation of this industry that is causing concern to our local residents. Thank you for letting me speak.
Yep. Good. Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, interesting points. Mr. Mitchell immediately begs the question, which, and I think Councillor Stock was very fair and reasonable suggestions, but that again, that has other consequences, doesn't it? In terms of, if you have accreditation, who's going to police it, who's going to enforce it, and is that further extra burden on the council services, etc. So just be interested to know what your view on that would be.
I thank you. I don't think accreditation for Rushcliffe Borough Council is easy to achieve. Regulation for Nottinghamshire might be easier. Regulation nationally would be a really, really good solution out of this.
I think, sorry, we talk about accreditation of managing agents, that they are a fit and proper and suitable person and a good agent rather than an unscrupulous one.
Sorry.
There are, but point of information, there are schemes in place. We would just ask the management agent that, before they be taken on board as a management agent for an area, that they be accredited, and they would have to arrange their accreditation and prove it through the existing schemes. It's not that I'm suggesting Rushcliffe takes on board a quality assessment of these organisations. Thank you.
Yeah. And any other comment, Mr. Mitchell? Or
no, I thought there's some very good suggestions for future investigation, including residents and looking at planning conditions to see if we can put it as a condition about.
Yeah, and I think what is being highlighted, I think we do need to scrutinise the way in which, personally, I agree with the condition of having a management company, but is the condition written in the right way? Does it say the right things? Has it got the right intention? I think that's one of the issues that we have to look at. Councillor Phillips, you wanted to come back?
Yeah. The only thing I wanted to add really was that issue where the management company agent can actually stop the sale of a property if they don't agree. If they're in dispute, then that management company can actually stop that sale. So, maybe we ought to have a clause in there where they can't actually have anything to do with the sale of the property.
I wasn't aware that there was are you sure that's right? So I can't see how legally a managing agent can basically stop a sale.
Well, my son's bought one of these new houses, and it's in his agreement. You have to get the permission of the management agent to before you sell.
Well, I think that's one of these unintended consequences. That's not something I was aware happened.
Mm.
So,
And I just think this is it. They just keep adding these little bits in there, and like with the shed, get permission and pay a fee for a shed. I think they're just sort of, pushing it a little bit and adding what they can where they think they can get away with it. So
well, that's where, as far as I'm concerned, I think we need to find some examples from different managing agents and what they are trying to impose as their conditions with residents. So, I mean, are you aware of, Mr. Mitchell, of those sorts of?
No, I'm not aware of those sort of conditions, but I think it's more like debt management. As developments get older, the objective of the management company, not the management agent, is to collect the money in. And if people aren't paying, then there's a debt against the property. And that may be the restriction on it, rather than actually saying you can't sell. A solicitor will do the search and find that the house owes X pounds to the management company, and that needs to be paid as part of the sale. But I can't think it actually stops the sale. Thank you.
Yeah, they're just putting a charge on the property, aren't they? Yeah. I've got Councillor Way and then Councillor Brennan. Councillor Way.
I'd like to thank Councillor Stopford for clarifying the management company and management agent, because I wasn't really aware of that. But I will go back and check with the people who've been contacting me, but I think they feel that the management agent has been imposed on them and they have had no say in it at all. So there's no opportunity for them to say they don't like that agency. As I understand it, a further new development that's coming in Eastleigh is going to be done differently, and it will be what sounds like a management company, because it was explained that the residents will run it and then they can employ an agent, which I think is what Councillor Stockwood was saying. But the ones I've been speaking to, they've just been handed over to their agents, feel that they didn't have any say in the agent at all. So the idea of having accreditation would be very useful for those residents to be able to say, well, actually, we've got an unaccredited agent, so can we have a different one? So that's one of the things. And from one of these developments where they've just had their initial bills for the agents, to the agents, one resident has sent me all his paperwork, and there is all sorts of interesting stuff in there that I hadn't come across before, including a list of charges, which might be some interesting reading for people to see as well. That's only come in the last couple of days, so I haven't sent it to Dave Mitchell yet, but I will do.
I don't know whether you'll be able to ask the residents' permission as to whether they will allow you to show those documents to us, so that we can get an idea of what's involved.
The resident said he was happy for me to share them. I haven't shared anything with Mr. Mitchell until I've actually asked the residents themselves what I can share. And some have said they're happy to have their personal details attached to it, although I think you'll see I've redacted quite a lot of it anyway. This particular person has asked it to be anonymised for the time being, but I think probably he would be prepared to talk one-to-one, perhaps to the chair or to Mr. Mitchell. Certainly, I think you'd be able to speak to him at some point about his experiences, because he has actually managed to get one or two things that were written in there changed, about changing his mortgage and the fees and everything like that. And he's actually managed to get that overturned, which is then got to be rolled out to the rest of the residents on that particular development. I haven't checked if that's happened, but it's a positive. So challenging things sometimes works.
Yeah, well, I wasn't suggesting, I'm quite happy for, not interested in the names of people. It's actually seeing the evidence of what's contained within the documents in terms of all these other conditions which seem to be being imposed. And I have to say, I was just completely unaware that these extra conditions were being imposed, which on the face of it seems very worrying. But obviously I'd like to just see some evidence of what is actually involved. So if you are able to get their permission for you to share the contents rather than names, then that would be extremely helpful. It does seem to me like it may be a case of us, if we feel that there is something that needs answering, that we can actually assemble a document and put it to government, put it to the Ministry of Housing and Local Government, that this is a problem, and to suggest perhaps an accreditation scheme and maybe other regulations on how these organisations operate. Because it doesn't matter which industry you're in, I think probably every industry in the country, there's always an unscrupulous person somewhere trying to make a dishonest buck, perhaps. I'm sure that 99% of them are absolutely fine, but somewhere there's always one that in any industry in the country. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Chair. I think I found this absolutely fascinating. I mean, it was an interesting subject before, but some of the stuff that's been teased out, I think, in this meeting has been quite eye-opening. I agree a lot of the comments you just made, Councillor Clark, and also Councillor Stockham and Councillor Phillips' contribution, I think, have been really, really helpful, really thoughtful. And I think we really ought to take some of this forward, and nationally as well as locally. I think the points that Councillor Way has raised sound to me, I'm not a lawyer, but in most contracts you would consider these to be quite unreasonable, additional demands placed on people after the fact. And the idea that you're having to be charged for putting a shed up in your own garden is quite baffling and astonishing and appalling. So yeah. I think, as much evidence, I don't know how much work would be involved in this, but as much evidence we can get of examples of these kind of things being inserted or being overlooked by lawyers in the first instance, if that's possible, but the extent to which we can build a bank of evidence that we could use to support a paper, I think, going forward, both looking at what solutions we might be able to determine locally, but most particularly because I think you started, Mr. Mitchell, by saying, or maybe you did, Councillor Clark, that a lot of councils are going to find themselves in exactly the same position, that this solution may not, or maybe cannot be simply a bespoke local programme of some kind, but it's something that needs looking at nationally, because some of this sounds really quite shocking. I think I am actually quite shocked at some of the things I'm hearing. And I think it's been really, really useful. I do think we should carry on taking this forward and not let it slip through the net.
Yeah, I would use sort of the words bizarre and shocking. What some of the examples that Councillor Way has with a shed business, I just find completely bizarre, and certainly it was absolutely, completely unintended consequence of the original policy. How that has crept in, I have absolutely no idea. And I also, the way the conversation has developed, I think this is a case, as well as maybe before we put it to government or in tandem or in parallel, that we put something to the local government association, either the Planning and Environment Board or the People and Places Board, which I sit on, because I think this is absolutely a national issue. It's not something that's peculiar to Rushcliffe, and I'm sure that other councils would be only too happy to be contributing to the debate and the call for some regulation. Mr. Mitchell, you were wanting to come in.
Just a couple of points. I think I would like to see those papers, because when anyone buys a new development, the developer puts on conditions, particularly while they're on site, because they don't want people putting caravans on the front and ruining the aspect that they're selling houses. And I think there may be some confusion between what is a development requirement to stop people ruining the aspect and a management company. And I think we've got, this has the potential to widen out to being a very, very large scrutiny item. And we need to, if we're going to be successful, we need to try and home it down. I think the challenge over the next few months, before we come back to you with when we've agreed any investigations, is how we home it down into something that is good to present to local government association and the national body. Councillor Stockwood is right. There have been national petitions on this, and it hasn't gone anywhere. So I think there's a bit more work required just to look at those and see what was the angle on that, and whether we can pick an angle that would be fruitful.
Yeah, I think I'll come to you in a second, Councillor Verdi. I think we need to develop shopping list to you, as you're suggesting, sort of honing or focusing, because the danger is you're trying to find information that maybe we don't need or something like that. So maybe some specific items that we would like you to go and investigate and come back with, actual evidence that we can, at the moment, and forgive me, I'm not accusing any of my colleagues on the scrutiny group at all, but we are dealing with sort of third-hand evidence, which we do need to see that proof for sure, so that when we next discuss it, we are discussing evidence and not hearsay. And I mean that in the politest sense. I'm not trying to accuse anybody of anything. So I'm trying to draw up a sort of a bit of a shopping list here, but Councillor Verdi, would you like to
Thank you, Chair. Without repeating all of the comprehensive points made by my fellow councillors, and I endorse all of those points, and Councillor Brennan, I think, summed up nicely what everybody had already said. But I mean, clearly we need further work undertaken here, and investigation into what the reality is around the profile of these managing agent stroke companies. But I suppose one of the biggest questions I would have is the objects of these sort of companies, particularly if it's a managing agent. No doubt it is a commercial organization, a profit-making organization, but is there something here as part of this work going forward whereby we can look at setting some standards and principles around these companies, being not profit-making organizations, which clearly the management companies I assume are, because if they are made up of the residents and house owners in a particular area, they are more concerned about providing the service rather than making a commercial profit. So I think one of the biggest questions for me as part of this work going forwards, and a question we need to answer is, one, is it possible to limit the objects of these companies in terms of what they are there for? Is it just a service for the local residents, or is it purely to make a quick buck, as we've referred to here, in which case it may be very difficult to stop them coming up with all of these additional elements that they are adding on. So I think that's really, without repeating, as I said, all of the other points that have been made, I think something I would really like to look into is what authority or power we may have to restrict the commercialization of these entities that exist. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Before we sort of start to sum up, Councillor Howard, is there anything you wish to add at all?
Yeah, so I've just been listening along a bit. I noticed Councillor Stotwood mentioned something about the prospect of asking the residents for their opinions. And I think that might be something that would be quite interesting, because obviously Councillor Way has her example of Eastleek. And are there any other examples of this? And if so, can we delve into them more? So is there any way of doing some kind of resident survey or something to people in this situation, just to see if we can get any more first-hand proof like you were talking about, so we can potentially do something about it, really, is all I was thinking.
Sure. Like all these things, Mr. Mitchell will now be thinking, what resources have we got to do all this work? So I'm sure it'll have to be a sort of a snapshot sample survey. We can't possibly survey everybody, but we would need to get some samples probably from different developments, wouldn't we? The question is, how do you actually choose those samples? So that's another little problem, but certainly we do need, as far as I can see, we do need a survey of some sort doing to get evidence directly from the residents, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that we're serving and they're the ones that we're representing. So we need to ensure that we understand their issues. I think we need to try and check the conditions, or the detail of the conditions that are put on at the time of planning permission, planning approval, as to what the conditions actually say, and are those conditions then being interpreted, shall we say, more creatively than they should be, if I can put it that way. I think perhaps the examples, if we can obtain some examples of the management contracts, just to see what they do actually say. If we can try and establish, going back to the conditions, the planning conditions, also encompassed in those conditions, Councillor Verdi touched on it, what sort of power or authority are vested in those conditions that are then transferred over to the managing companies or agents. What accreditation is available around the country? What organisations are around? What regulation, are there any regulatory organisations at all at the moment that we could try and obtain samples of. Do any other members of the group have any other suggestions as to sort of focused issues that we might be asking the officers to come back with when we debate it next time? Mr. Mitchell?
You were very right. I was thinking about resources of all this activity. Now,
what a surprise!
Yeah, I know. The issue about getting hold of management contracts, maybe it's an opportunity for local ward councillors to identify a medium or large site and a resident on it and get hold of the management contract, like Councillor Way has done. Because actually, we have no chance of getting these. They are private documents. Unless they're available on Google, the management companies won't share them with us easily. So it might be, that would be in a fairly independent way, rather than open up the floodgates and getting thousands of responses back. If we could target, say, 10 developments, which will all have the, everyone on that development will have the same management company, it would be helpful to get a selection of those 10 from yourselves, and that's my pass back to you to
Oh, well, that's a comment, because yes, I mean, I'm sort of got my own words coming back at me, haven't I? We're here to represent the residents, so we need to get the story from those residents, don't we? So that's fair game. We'll take that one on the chin. But so yeah, it's a team effort, isn't it?
Yes.
So we all want to make sure we can. The more varied the information, the better. Just having information just from one source doesn't give us a good comprehensive picture, does it? So the more developments we can get that information from, the better. So the question is, how do we actually make those contacts, and how do we make sure that we get each member involved? Mr. Mitchell?
Can I suggest that we'll pull together a list of actions from this meeting? I think you've run through them very well, Councillor Clark. And maybe I can suggest some developments in the area that are subject to management fees, and try and pick one per ward, or one, certainly a few wards. I mean, we've already, in this room, we've got Gamston a bit, Bingham, Eastleigh.
Shelford Road at Ratcliffe.
Yeah. So I think if I could identify some sites where I'm quite happy to have more, but if I could get a selection of about 5 to 10 arrangements, we can probably just quickly analyse and see what the differences is on them.
Sure. Okay. Right. Does that seem a good way forward, everyone? Anybody have any other pressing requests in terms of? Well, we can talk about it on the work programme, but obviously it's going to be a few meetings hence before we'll be able to get that information back, but we can discuss that very, very briefly when we talk about the item on the work programme, rather than try and talk about that now. So before I move on to the next item, anybody have anything burning here, or is everybody happy that we take that course of action? Okay, great. Well, thanks very much for those contributions, and I think that was all very interesting, and I didn't realise some of the things that were going on, so I've learned something new this evening myself. You can never stop learning, as they say. Right, so thank you for that. Moving on to item 6, and this is the Council's wider approach to assisting economic recovery in Rushcliffe. I do just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to all the staff and workforce, the way that everybody's mucked in relation to this COVID crisis, which has suddenly came upon us. It brought us into some very strange times, some very tumultuous times, and people have had to do things very differently, and to do things differently very quickly. So I think obviously everybody has been affected in some way, but I think staff and workforce have done an admirable job in rising to the challenge of trying to keep the services going and trying to do their best to support both residents and the businesses in this case, because this particular report does refer to the businesses primarily. So with that, I notice we have Caroline Saxton and Catherine Evans hiding behind the black screens. Oh, here they! Oh, it's as if by magic, up they pop. So I know you've been working very hard. I know we have mentioned this before, but who's going to start off on this one?
It's going to be me, so I'll share the presentation. So just bear with me 1 second. Can everybody see that? Is that all right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's, I think everybody knows who I am, but I'm Catherine Evans. I'm Transformation Service Manager and Economic Growth Manager at Rushcliffe Borough Council. So Caroline and I came to present to this group earlier this year, but quite differently. We were actually face to face last time. So between us, Caroline and I will run through this presentation. So the D2N2 Growth Hub, which we spoke about last time, which is the kind of one-stop shop that provides support for businesses, have done a survey that they started in April this year of the impact that COVID-19 has had on businesses. So I think before I start this, what it's worth saying is this survey, the results of this aren't representative. So they've had 780 responses. So it's a good response rate, but clearly it's not every single business across the Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire area. And clearly the findings are quite negative. Obviously what you find with a survey like this is those businesses that have been negatively impacted will respond. Now clearly there has been a significant negative impact on businesses, and I'm not suggesting that's not the case, but what it doesn't pick out is any businesses that might have be doing well at the moment, where there might be opportunities to learn from some of those businesses, and that's clearly a key piece of work moving forward that we can pick some of those out. So as you can see from this first slide, 98% of those that responded said COVID-19 had had a negative impact on their business. 98% said it had impacted their business, 96% of those saying that was a negative impact. And the top 3 impacts that were reported were decreased sales and bookings, cash flow issues, and staff being in isolation. This slide shows the effects of COVID-19 on businesses, so across 4 different areas. And as you can see, the area where it's an over 50% negative impact has got quite high numbers. So 64% saying there was an impact on customer base, 62% saying an impact on operating capacity, 72% saying an over 50% negative impact on sales, and then 39% on staff morale. This slide picks out those that had identified themselves in that category around kind of having the worst impact on their business. So the D2N2 did some further work on those particular businesses. So what they found was it's tending to be younger companies that operate in a business to consumer environment rather than a business to business environment, and tending to be smaller businesses and those that operate at a more local level. So and the sectors which have experienced the greatest impact are accommodation and food services, arts, entertainment and recreation, and wholesale and retail. They also showing that there seems to be a greater impact in more rural areas. They need to do some more analysis on this, but it's assumed and likely to be linked to the dependence on tourism and hospitality in some of those areas. The 3 main concerns highlighted by the businesses moving forward were decreasing consumer confidence, financial impact on operations, and then global or UK recession. And then the things that would be of most support to them moving forward were financial support and business planning. 72% of businesses in D2N2 have furloughed their staff, and that number is 60% for Rushcliffe businesses, and then 5% made redundancies, and again that's 3% for Rushcliffe. So some information from HMRC was that approximately 11,600 Rushcliffe employees have been furloughed, which is 27.6% of jobs. And that's lower than other areas of the county. The sectors with higher levels of furloughing are wholesale and retail, accommodation and food services, and manufacturing. There was also a Midlands Engine report released last week, I think, that stated that retail footfall fell to 20% of its 2019 levels and remains below 40%. And then there was some work done by a company called AL Marketing about shoppers returning to the high street. So 32% are nervous about shopping again. And the things that would help them and encourage them back onto the high street would be people observing social distancing, limiting the people that are allowed in stores and restaurants, and then hand sanitizer units within stores and within restaurants. And then there was also some feedback that indicated that people would be less willing to travel into the city at the moment because obviously the number of shops and the number of people that will be there, and so local town centres may benefit, and perhaps there's an opportunity there for us for some of our smaller town centres to attract people in. This information is about the claimant counts, obviously not from the D2N2 Growth Hub. So based on the Universal Credit and Job Seekers Allowance statistics, there were 81,730 claimants. This is across Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, including the cities, in May 2020. So that's 138% increase from last year, and 25% up from the previous month. So despite the higher growth compared to the same period last year, claimants as a percentage of the working age population is slightly lower in D2N2 than nationally. So it's 5.9% of the working age population. Nationally, it's 6.4%. Rushcliffe is one of the areas that are reporting a significantly higher year-on-year increase. However, we started out with a lower claimant count, so that could be the reason for that. D2N2 have projected unemployment rates for the districts, and Rushcliffe is around 7%, and it was around, so this is kind of in the future, not now. So it was around 2.5% in December 2019, so that gives you an indication of the rise. And this is lower than other areas of Nottinghamshire and most of Derbyshire, just not Derbyshire Dales. The evidence is suggesting there's going to be the greatest impact on low skilled and low wage jobs, and so therefore it's anticipated the impact in Rushcliffe on its residents is expected to be lower than other areas of Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, because our workforce tends to be higher skilled workers. And then job postings in D2N2 have decreased by 29% compared to last May, so May 2019. And now over to Caroline to talk about some of the work that we've done so far.
Good evening. Yeah, so way back when this all started, we realised the importance, obviously, of getting information out to both the public and to businesses. So we set up a dedicated web page. Since it was set up in late March, it's had over 12,000 visits. Both our comms team and Jacob, who works with us, many of you will know, have been doing an awful lot of work on social media. Facebook has had 110 updates on our Rushcliffe social media, with a reach of over 85,000 engagements. Again, a similar number for Twitter and Instagram, which we're trying to increase the uptake on that a little bit more. That's had 15 updates with the reach of 3,500 people. In terms of the Rushcliffe Business Partnership website as well, that's had 3,084 visits since it was created on the 3rd of April. Again, the social media, which Jacob's primarily responsible for, 40 tweets in April, 38 tweets in May, 42 tweets in June. A lot of the top tweets were around events that we were running, Ask the Expert, boosting your blog writing skills, and virtual networking. So yeah, there's been an awful lot of hard work and engagement in terms of contacting both businesses and the public digitally. Can I have my next slide, please?
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. So also around a similar time was the small business grants, retail and hospitality grants. The economic growth team teamed up with the revenues team in order to try and reach out to as many businesses as we could as quickly as possible. We've now paid out 94.8 of small business and retail hospitality grants with a value of about 17.5 million. In terms of the discretionary grant, that started about 6th of June. There were about 126 applications, and we had an update from revenues this afternoon. So far, they've awarded 22 grants with a value of 184,000. Only today, the scheme has been relaunched. Part of the reason we struggled to allocate the grants was the restrictive criteria. So the criteria have now been changed. You may have seen on social media that we've started to re-advertise on the fact that the discretionary grant scheme's back in business. And I know the revenues team are looking at current applications as well as trying to reach out for current applications which didn't qualify sort of with the original restrictions on it. So yeah, the revenues team working hard on that. Again, we've been reaching out to the Rushcliffe Business Partnership and other locally established trading groups, Ruddington Traders and East Leek. I know the Rushcliffe Business Partnership has been holding virtual networking events fortnightly, attracting between 25 and 35 local businesses. There's been about seven sessions held so far, and Councillor Edavine and Jacob have attended each call. Catherine, you've been involved in that as well. The business partnership have also been running webinars on topics such as managing your cash flow, content marketing, holding events online. About 65 businesses so far have attended these sessions. We've also run one specifically for high street businesses, health and beauty, KH Hair ran one recently just prior to the reopening of hairdressers. And again, D2N2, we always work quite closely with them. They've been running a lot of webinars on topics such as risk management, business continuity, and understanding the furlough scheme. And we're continuing to work with them in the future. Apparently about 86 businesses have attended the Growth Hub webinars to date. That's the stats that we've been given. Okay, we've also...
Caroline, sorry to interrupt. Was that 86% in Rushcliffe?
86 Rushcliffe,
86 Rushcliffe
delegates have attended over the course of the Growth Hub webinars.
Yeah, right. Thanks.
That number probably needs updating. We haven't had an updated figure from the Growth Hub for a while, but we can get more data from them. Okay, as part of the business offer, we've also signed up to a grant finding portal available for businesses to register and find out what sort of funding is available to them. We've been supporting the markets reopening. Bingham Market is now fully reopened. Ophelia's been doing a really good job working to ensure the public have got the safety message, and our environmental health team have been involved as well to ensure that the markets can open safely. West Bridgford Farmers Market, I think there's been 3 or 4 now. I nipped down to the last one last Saturday, and we're up to about 18 traders now. It's being closely monitored, and the social distancing is still taking place. We produced a market guidance document and shared with other groups, including the one in Ruddington, just a bit of best practice document. Again, been trying to support, working with our environmental health team to support businesses to reopen safely. We've got resources on our website, including signage that businesses can download, print off, and a sort of 5 steps guidance that they can sort of have a bit of a checklist to say that they've done, and display that to the public to say that they've checked that they're doing correct guidance. And we've been very proactive with contacting businesses, primarily Jacob, about support requirements, and both support requirements and the sort of PR publicity thing in terms of finding out what businesses are open, what offer they've got to the public, and publishing it along our social media channels as well. Yeah, there's the social distancing signage. We've been trying to work with county highways to offer sort of improvements in the town centres to ensure social distancing. We've had the signage in each of the town centres, and there are proposals that are still with the county that are being considered. And finally, communications has been a big part of all this, both in terms of support for businesses and sort of reassuring the public, getting the balance between businesses are open for business, but also reopen safely. Yeah, it's getting that balance. So going forward, just continuing to review the data that's coming from the Growth Hub. All along this, we've been quite reactive, but at the same time trying to be proactive, to flex our plans, listen to businesses and see what kind of support we can offer. Promoting the webinars and the business support. There's also the green economic recovery side to this. We're working with colleagues across the county. The County Council are developing a proposal to do some further work on this, which links to the low carbon work being led by Kath Marriott and the wider Notts districts, county and the city. Again, the consistent and clear communications. And finally, the input at a local level. We've over the past few weeks, we've held the growth boards to try and get some input at local level to what businesses need and what the requirements of the town centres and wider areas are. And I think that's me.
So just moving on to some of you, I think probably most of you will already be aware, we have been allocated £106,000 from the Reopening High Street Safely Fund. So this is a fund that's come from government, it's European funding. So there are some quite strict criteria around how we can spend the money and what we can spend it on. So there's on the slide, you can see the kind of 4 points of eligible activity. We are yet to receive a formal funding agreement. And the way it works is that we will spend and then have to draw down that money. So claim the money as we spend. So we don't have £106,000 in a pot somewhere. So at the moment, because we don't have a funding agreement in place, Caroline and I are kind of going backwards and forwards a little bit with Citizen Local Growth Unit in government to check if things are eligible. So if there are ideas that come from this evening's discussion, and certainly ones that have come through the Local Growth Board, where it isn't clear if something is eligible or not, we are checking that as we need to. So that's the eligible activity. The things that are listed that aren't eligible within the current guidance is activity that provides no additionality, so things that we might have planned already or and already in place officers' time, for example. So mine or Caroline's time wouldn't be eligible for funding. Capital expenditure, but some temporary changes are permitted. So some of the public realm work that Caroline mentioned that county highways are doing that is temporary, that might mean new signage and things going up, that's permitted. And then direct grants to businesses or buying businesses any kind of sort of personal protective equipment or things that they can put into their stores to like perspex screens and that kind of thing. That's not permitted under the current guidance. So our plans so far for that pot of money, Caroline's already mentioned the County Council's public realm highways work. So there's a commitment across all the districts that any changes that the county council put into place in terms of any temporary traffic restrictions, the funding for that would come from these allocations. It's not clear yet what that cost will be. As Caroline mentioned, we're still waiting for some proposals to come forward for other areas of the borough. We've already got things in place in West Bridgford and Bingham, but clearly there's a need for things in other areas as well. It can be for things like additional social distancing signage in town centres where that might be required, and as over time where that might need to be replaced or changed depending on guidance that might change. Caroline and I have been working closely with some consultants to appoint them to provide support for businesses. So there's 3 different areas of work for that. So 3 different consultants that we're currently working with. It's in the very early stages. So there's some detail, but a limited amount at the moment, but a consultant who will deliver some webinars focused on how a business can kind of continue to deliver excellent customer service and maximise sales in their store, sort of post-COVID and in the current situation, in the new normal that we find ourselves in. A separate commission for a consultant to provide webinars and online training, but also one-to-one business support around digital. So things around improving your website, marketing on social media, and all that kind of thing. So improving the online presence of our retailers. And then the third one is a shop local type campaign. So a PR consultancy who's going to develop us some material that we can use in different medium to get the message out about continuing to shop local and continuing to support your local high street. We are also looking to support or establish new retail forums in areas so the retailers and hospitality businesses can share best practice and support each other. So that already exists in some communities, so like Eastleigh Traders Association that we engage with and Buddington Village Partnership. But where those don't exist, we're keen to try and establish something that would also help us then when we want to get messages out, that we've got that group to go to. And then we've also already been doing, this currently hasn't cost us anything, but we've already been doing a lot of patrols around town centres. So ourselves and environmental health officers have been out visiting various businesses. Clearly from an environmental health point of view, it's making sure that they're doing what they need to be doing. But Caroline and Jacob and myself have also been going out to make sure that businesses have got the support that they need at the moment. So we're building excellent relationships with some of our retailers and hospitality businesses at the moment, which has been a positive. And then just a reminder that our recommendations that were contained in the report were obviously noting the content of the report. And then if you've got any additional ideas or guidance on the planned work that we've outlined. Thank you.
Great, lovely. Well, thank you very much indeed, both of you, and thank you for all the work that you've been doing to support our businesses, and comprehensive report. And so lots of things do to come up, don't they? For instance, paragraph 4.6 relates to the youth unemployment, and so one of the consequences highlighted there, that obviously youth entering the labour market are going to find it all the more difficult with that extra competition from experienced people who've lost their jobs, regrettably, which is going to be a major challenge for everybody. One question, Catherine, perhaps 4.22 on page 20, the Local Resilience Forum. I'd just be interested to know how well that's working. Is that sort of good cooperation between all the partners, etc.? And are there any particular issues arising, or frustrations or challenges arising out of that could be done better?
I think so. I'm from I suppose a economic point of view, I sit on I'm vice chair of the Local Resilience Forum Economy Cell, and Caroline or I sit on the Public Realm Cell. So I think it's kind of early days for some of this. So the Economy Cell are currently developing their action plan, And I think one of the challenges that is talked about a lot is how what are we delivering at a local level, what's in our Rushcliffe action plan, then what's in the Nottinghamshire Local Resilience Forum action plan, and then to Response Board action plan. So there's kind of different levels, but everyone is kind of working together and acknowledging the fact that we're sort of learning as we go, and we're trying not to duplicate and tread on anyone's toes. So I think as these action plans get developed and emerge, it will be clearer where people are doing different things. So but yeah, the LEPA on the economy cell, as well as officers from the economy cell being on the LEP board, so we're ensuring that there isn't that duplication.
Okay, thanks. I'm putting both of you on the spot really, but I'm sort of giving you an opportunity to make any comment if you wish to make any comment. Do either of you have any sort of frustrations or thoughts of, oh, if only we could do this, or if only we were allowed to do that, then it would work better? So I'm just asking if you've got any particular of your own suggestions from what you've experienced so far already.
I think in terms of this pot of funding, it would help if we could do more with that. There's certainly lots of ideas that we've had that we've kind of said, no, you can't do that. And I think particularly being able to support businesses more directly with grants or buying them equipment or something, whatever it might be. Clearly they're all well, some of them are just starting to reopen and have been closed for a period of time. Their cash flow is strained, so to be able to give them something that can help them with their reopening plans would have been helpful.
Any thoughts, Caroline, at all?
As Catherine said, you know, the fund has been quite restrictive, and we're still struggling now, even with the business support. It has to be focused around reopening high streets safely. So it can't be generic, it all has to be very, and it's the place marketing as well. I mean, Catherine talked about the Shop Locally campaign, the company that we've commissioned or requested quotes for that side of it. Again, we have to be very careful that it's not a place marketing campaign. It has to be a sort of communications campaign around reopening high streets safely. So in terms of that, it's a lot of effort to try and spend the money in the correct way. And of course we're doing it at risk, because we're hoping that we're compliant, and when it comes to submitting a claim, we'll be able to recoup those fundings. So we have got an external consultant who's helping us with that, and that's part of the funding that we can reclaim. But it's sort of having that expertise around the requirements for the funding on top of everything else that we're doing. So yeah, it's been a challenge, but as always, we try and rise to it. Again, the county highways has been quite challenging, because proposals have been put forward. They've come back to us on what could be done, but then they're saying that they need to go back now to the parish councils to make sure that it's okay with them, what we've proposed with them. So again, it's all been a quite long-winded process in hindsight, but these things happen and we carry on.
Good, yeah, well, I'm sure you do, and do a good job as well, for sure.
Thank you.
Just throwing out the question as well to any officer that may be able to answer it, because I'm quite sure the answer may well be it's early days, we haven't had the guidance yet. But in terms of the new regulation that's going to be coming in next week about wearing face masks, etc., you talked about officers going around giving advice to retailers, etc. Have you got any sense at all that the district councils may end up being the ones that have to, in inverted commas, police the lack of face coverings in retail sectors? Because I think the police are saying they don't want to do it, and the retailers are saying they don't want to do it. Are we the piggy in the middle that's going to end up being told that we've got to go and police it. I realise the answer is you don't know, but I'd be just interested to know whether you've had any secret guidance that we don't know about.
Yeah, we don't, and I think the view of when we've been out kind of on our walkabouts, the view of environmental health and the police has been that environmental health deal with the business and making sure the business is doing what it should be doing, and the police will deal with members of the public who might not be doing what they should be doing. So in answer to your question, my assumption is it'll be the police rather than us that kind of thing would fall to. And clearly a shop can refuse entry to somebody if they're not wearing a mask if they want to, or ask somebody to leave. But yeah, I'm not, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Right. Group members, any contributions from anybody? Stunned silence. Oh, Councillor Stockwood.
You didn't look like you had anybody speaking, so I thought I'd give it a go. Firstly, I think some of the steps that have been taken in a very comprehensive plan around about economic recovery, and that it seems to be working well. I think there's a number of issues around Bingham Town Centre where it would be, you know, we welcome all the updates that ward members and the parish council can receive. I declare that I am the mayor of Bingham, and all the updates and keeping other partners involved and the ward councillors involved is I think always beneficial, because ward councillors can do that. But I understand that scrutiny is not about me talking about Bingham issues, so I'll talk about a wider issue. My main concern would be, I think that what I'm seeing around the country is local lockdowns and the concern about a second wave. And are we, in our recovery, putting in place the steps that we would take if that came to Bingham, the borough, if that came to the borough, in regards to a local lockdown or a second wave. With regards to unemployment, I'm not familiar with the exact process of universal credit or claimants, but is there any way we can facilitate not having to travel into the city if that's still necessary, by using our customer contact points to enable face-to-face interviews or support people who need access to being able to submit forms? I think most of it's online now, but is there any way that we can use our customer contact points? Are we restarting, as one of our things, the job clubs, so that we are promoting other employment opportunities as they come forward to residents who are finding that they're part of the 7% who are not working, preparing for the future in terms of a second wave or a thing. And you know, I do commend keeping in contact with ward councillors and parish councils, because they do know, you know, they do have some knowledge that can be captured and contribute up to the local resilience forums through the resilience forum structures, to help with programs that are working in very local scenarios, such as the town centres. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, universal credit is a big subject, and this discussion really relates more around businesses rather than personal universal credit. But Caroline, you have something?
Just in response to that, we have restarted our employment and skills group. That was sort of put on hold for a while, but there is a piece of work mainly led by the county around employment and skills. Obviously, you know, the huge effects it's going to have on young people and people in general. But from that point of view, we have very close contact with Positive Futures, Mark Clifford, the Back to Work Club that's restarting up in Bingham. And yes, we've still got those close relationships. So it's something that we are restarting. It's never really gone away, but, you know, just in terms of resources, the focus has been around contacting the businesses and the administration of the support for businesses. But obviously the employment skills is a hugely important part of our work, and it's regaining momentum, if you like.
Okay, all right, thanks. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, just to add my voice once again to support the officers, that there's some really good stuff here, and lots of feedback I'm hearing from local businesses in terms of accessing grants and so on have been really positive. So I think we're doing a really good job, and it's not the same everywhere. So I think there is some real added value going on for Rushcliffe Borough. I have a couple of observations. I have ranted about this EU fund on a number of fora, so forgive me for repeating myself, but it's enormously frustrating. Although this isn't a huge amount of resource, it could be a very important contribution to reopening local small high streets in some of our smaller settlements. And it appears to be designed by somebody that's either never worked for a business, or still less ever run a business, as is usually the case with any business facing grants from the EU. It's designed in a vacuum. And if all we can afford, all we are eligible for is consultancy support to small local retailers who really don't need that kind of support for the most part, they're going to want real practical help on the ground. The fact that we have this resource and we can't use it for that, and I know the officers are as frustrated and can't say so necessarily, but it's incredibly frustrating and very disappointing. And one thing I would like to see is, presumably this European fund has an ex post evaluation, because all European grants have these massive evaluation programs attached to them. I'd like to see it. So come the day that this grant is ever evaluated, to what it actually achieved, what it's spent on, and how much impact it had on local businesses and on opening safely our high streets. I would really like that scrutiny to come back to scrutiny with that report. I realise it may be way off, maybe after the next election in the way that it used to work. But if somebody somewhere could have a look at the ex post evaluation of this programme, I would be fascinated to know what actual impact on real businesses it had. The other point is, I think, picking up on the issue, I realise this is specifically about support to businesses, and I have raised this point as well, so forgive me. But looking at some of the stuff that we do, so the young programme, things that we deliver to customers directly, be it young people or whatever, that we focus, we have another look at those that deliver. I know I've said this before, and Mr. Mitchell will have heard it certainly, but that we look through the lens of post-COVID recovery, so that we are sure that if we are providing going forward those same services, we're doing so flexing them to make sure that they address the new challenges that these target groups or customer groups are going to be facing, which may be different, they may be similar, but they more than certainly will be different going forward, and that we just look at it through that lens and make sure that what we are delivering is relevant now to the new world was to the pre-COVID one. I think that's all I want to say at that point, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So I suppose really, well, we've been asked if we have any additional ideas and guidance. The trouble is that thankfully the officers are doing such a good job already that it's difficult to probably find some meaningful tasks, but certainly Councillor Brennan's just mentioned the looking at post-COVID support, and I absolutely agree and support that, in that we do need to be ready to be flexible, and if there are things happening maybe that we didn't realise were happening, that we can actually introduce that flexibility and see if we can support people or businesses in a different way. I think it's the retail sector is the one that's the really big challenge in getting customers out again and getting them onto the, I was going to say getting onto the streets, getting onto the high streets in a social distance sort of way, so that they feel comfortable and safe. And I mean, public transport is pretty well being used very little. There are very few passengers on the buses, purely because they're in the main they're too frightened to go on the buses because they end up in too close contact. So it's trying to encourage customers to come out in a safe way and get that confidence that when they're on the high street they will feel safe. Councillor Brannan, you want to come back?
Thank you. Yeah, it's just the other point that I was going to mention, and I don't want to fall into the same trap as Councillor Stockwood, but in terms of Radcliffe-on-Trent, we have put forward a number of ideas for the main road to help reopening on the main road through the growth board. And I think that's been a very useful process that is more widely applicable because it's focused on some very practical things that we might be able to do by walking your high street and talking to local businesses and seeing what challenges they're facing. They can be very simple things like we need a new litter bin outside, or we need some new posters or more posters in this place than that, rather than that place. So there's some very small but very important practical things that can be done if we can find the resources to do them. And I know the officers are being very creative in trying to find ways to help support that. I think it's really helpful. I'd also like to pick up on Councillor Stockwood's point about any further lockdowns and the impact it might have locally. I know that we have mentioned this before. I know there is a plan, or I understand there's a plan for Nottinghamshire or Rushcliffe. But I think it might be helpful to share it if it's not a big piece of work. I just think it'd be useful for us to understand what you will do if there's another lockdown and how we can support and communicate with our local businesses if necessary, if unfortunately, and hopefully it won't happen, but if we were to experience another lockdown, how quickly we can marshal our support and help, notwithstanding whether there's any available from government, but what we will be doing locally. It would be helpful to share it when we come back again.
Yeah, Mr. Mitchell.
Yes, thank you. Yes, a good point. As you rightly say, there are plans for dealing with local lockdowns, and we are learning from places like Leicester and others who are having to deal with it. The responsibility for those plans is with the county council, as you expect, as public protection, and the districts, as Catherine and Caroline said. We support, we attend those groups. I will check whether that is in the public domain. I'm not sure. But if it is, then sometimes you can be a bit scaremongering about this. So I will check whether it's in the public domain and whether it can be shared. Thank you.
Right, I understand that. Thank you.
Yeah, it was interesting what Councillor Brennan said, because in Radcliffe-on-Trent, one of the suggestions we made is that the possible temporary widening of the pavements to allow social distancing and to allow some of the cafes to expand. Unlike in West Bridgford, I had occasion a couple of days ago. I was actually on Central Avenue, and I had to actually, and not just me, half a dozen other people, we all walked in the road in order to avoid people on the to social distance. And for anybody that was a passenger on the buses, I apologise, but we held up the buses whilst we walked down the road in social distance. So there we go. It would be nice if we could actually get Central Avenue adjusted as well. So any other contributions? I think the points that we seem to be talking about at the moment are more towards post-COVID rather than now. So I think the 2 points seem to have been on the agenda are to how do we guard against future potential lockdown or a repeat of a lockdown, and also how do we address our flexibility in terms of post-COVID business support. I don't know, I think we seem to be agreeing that as much is being done as can be done at the moment in the current support, so that's more of the sort of the future. Have I got that sense correct, Catherine?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the work that we're doing at the moment around kind of direct contact with businesses, so either over the phone or via email or going out and visiting and getting contact details, will only help us should there be a future lockdown, because we're building those relationships all this time. So next time we're kind of going into something more prepared with a better database to work from. The other thing that we've done, so our allocation of funding, and I know it's not a brilliant example, but we've not allocated all of that against projects. So there's some of that remains in a pot, and the idea behind that is that can be then, that's there to be used in the future should we need to be doing things, so we can respond to things as things change.
Right. Okay. Well, members, is that a fair appraisal of where we're at. I would like, and this is incumbent upon probably upon Tracy, but I would like to ensure that our congratulations and thanks to the staff and workforce, and particularly in relation to this particular issue, to the officers' efforts in supporting businesses in Rushcliffe. And I would like to ensure that those thanks are recorded in the minutes somewhere.
Yes, yes, I have got those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
I just wanted to make sure that I could hear your voice, Tracy.
Yeah, I'm still here. I've not fallen asleep. Thank you.
Right, is that fair, everybody? Can we leave it like that? And it's more a question of looking towards post-COVID, rather than the current time. So
Yeah.
Everybody happy with that? Yep. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much indeed, and thank you, ladies, for your efforts. And sorry to have kept you into the evening so long.
Thank you.
Thank you anyway. Just moving on then, item 7, hopefully this will be moderately brief, relating to the work programme. You'll notice that we've now got in August the developer presentation and planning enforcement, which we've sort of postponed from this time because there's a bit more information. Well, it's a bit more of a challenge to get the information ready. So that's sort of the first stage of planning enforcement. And again, in October, so far we've got the customer services and digital transformation. And in January, the cashless society. Could well be, and I'm assuming, Mr. Mitchell, we've got to leave this moderately open at this stage because you don't know and we don't know what actual work is involved in terms of the open spaces survey and information gathering. So presumably we'll have to wait to see whether it can come to October or January as a follow-up. Mr. Mitchell?
Yeah, if I could say, I mean, I'm happy to do in this item updates of where we're up to on those that are moving forward. But just quickly, can I go back to the cashless one? Because the update on cashless, we did have a consultation with the parishes, and that did identify some quite interesting figures, with 60% of parishes feeling that there was a bit of an issue with cash. And that included the bigger towns, parishes, who really want a bank in their area to help things like markets and others to pay money in. So that there was some very good information came back from that with some way forward. But we're in that was done in March, and since March we've had this crisis. And I don't think if you walk in a shop now, many people pay by cash. Nearly everyone is going cashless, and the reason we've deferred bringing this back is I think we're in a new world with that, and we need to understand it a little bit more and what support there will be for residents who can't pay by cash. Certainly supermarkets are stepping up to the plate on that at some point, but that's why it's been moved back to January. I will put open spaces in on January, but I'll be quite happy to bring back probably in October in this item just an update of some of the investigations going on and maybe a request for some more information if we haven't got it. And I think that's all we added tonight. And obviously Councillor Kumalak sitting in the audience, and obviously the overview group can consider if there are any other items as well.
Sure. Yes, I mean the business of the cashless does bring other issues in, because what it has meant is that elderly people or vulnerable people who are maybe living in more rural areas, who are having shopping done by other people, whether it's neighbours, friends or whoever, and they probably need to give the people who are doing the shopping, give them some cash, which they won't be able to obtain because they're sort of stuck out in rural areas. So it does bring extra anomalies, and those are all the sorts of the challenges which do occur. Okay, yes, we are in a large part becoming cashless, but there is still quite a proportion of the population that don't have cards and can't get out to use the cards. Right, does anybody have any requests? I mean, apart from the matrix availability, does anything spring to mind immediately in terms of items to consider for the future? If not, then is everybody happy to accept that work programme as it stands? Everybody happy with that? Great. Okay, lovely. Right. Well, hey, how about that? This is 1 minute to 9. So we just made it within 2 hours. Phew. That's good. Lovely. Great. Well, thanks very much for that. Very interesting first item and an extraordinarily important first item. So I think that will in time mean that we may have some projects coming out of Rushcliffe Borough Council nationally, who knows. So with that, everybody, thanks very much indeed for your time, and keep safe, keep well, and we'll see you, oh actually we'll see you tomorrow evening, won't we, at full council. So can't wait until then. Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Good
And
night.